I am sitting in my corner office on the 20th floor looking out over the city I helped build when the envelope arrives. It is thick, formal, marked urgent. Inside is a handwritten letter from my father begging me to come back and save the family business. 5 years ago, this moment would have destroyed me. 5 years ago, I would have dropped everything to prove my worth to them. But today, as I hold this letter in my hands, I feel nothing but peace, because they taught me the most valuable lesson anyone ever could. Sometimes the people who overlook you set you free. And I used that freedom to build something they never imagined I could. Before I take you back to where this all began, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. If you have ever felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to believe in you, most hit that like button right now. And subscribe, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and what it really means to succeed. Now let me tell you how a family dinner in the spring of 2018 set my entire life on fire. The company was called Harrison and Sons Construction. My father, Robert Harrison, founded it back in 1978 when he was just 25 years old. He started with one truck, a handful of tools, and a dream to build something lasting. By the time I came along, that dream had grown into a solid business with 45 employees, steady revenue of around $3 million a year, and a reputation for quality residential construction and renovations throughout Portland, Oregon. 3 generations of sweat and sacrifice went into every foundation we poured, every roof we raised. I was the second son, the one who showed up. I started working for my father when I was 18 years old, right out of high school. While my friends were sleeping in and partying, I was on construction sites at 6 in the morning, learning to read blueprints, mix concrete frame walls. I did not mind the early mornings or the physical labor. I loved it. This was not just a job to me. It was family legacy. It was history. It was home. I worked my way up from the ground level, literally. I spent summers hauling lumber in 100-degree heat. I spent winters insulating attics while my fingers went numb. I learned every aspect of the business, from pouring foundations to managing client relationships. At night, I took classes at Portland State University, earning my business administration degree one course at a time, because I wanted to be ready when my father needed someone to help lead the company into the future. By 2018, I had 10 years of experience under my belt. I knew every client by name. I knew every supplier's phone number by heart. I could walk onto any job site and tell you exactly what stage of completion we were at just by looking. Then there was my older brother, Derek. He was 4 years older than me, which made him 32 that spring. Derek took a different path. He went to Stanford, got his MBA, and landed a job in San Francisco working for a tech startup. He wore expensive suits, drove a Tesla, and came home maybe twice a year for major holidays. When he did visit, our parents lit up like he was royalty returning from distant lands. My mother, Patricia, would spend days preparing his favorite meals. My father would sit at the edge of his seat, hanging on every word Derek said about venture capital and disruptive innovation and market penetration strategies. I understood it in a way. Derek was impressive on paper. He had the prestigious degree, the Silicon Valley job, the polished confidence that came from boardroom presentations. What he did not have was any real understanding of our business. He had never spent a day on a job site. He could not tell the difference between a 2x4 and a 2x6. He did not know the names of the men who had worked for our father for 20 years. But he had that MBA from Stanford. And in my parents' eyes, that mattered more than anything I had built with my own 2 hands. The dinner happened on a Sunday evening in April. My parents still lived in the same house in Lake Oswego, where I grew up, a comfortable 4-bedroom with a view of the lake. We had these monthly family dinners, a tradition my mother insisted on maintaining, even though Derek rarely showed up. This time, though, Derek had flown in from San Francisco, and I could tell immediately that something was different. There was an energy in the air, a sense of anticipation that made my stomach tight. My mother had made pot roast, Derek's favorite, with roasted carrots and mashed potatoes. The house smelled like Sunday dinners from my childhood. We sat around the same oak table where I had done my homework as a kid, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays and small victories. The conversation started normally enough. My father asked about work. I told them about a lakeside home renovation we had just completed, how we had come in under budget, and the client was so thrilled they had already referred us to 3 of their neighbors. My parents nodded politely, but I could see their attention was elsewhere. When Derek started talking about his life in San Francisco, about startup culture and stock options and networking events, they leaned forward. They asked questions. They smiled. It was a dynamic I had lived with my entire life, so familiar it barely stung anymore, or so I told myself. We were halfway through dessert, my mother's apple pie, when my father cleared his throat in that particular way that meant he had something important to say. I looked up, fork halfway to my mouth, and saw him exchange a glance with my mother. She nodded encouragingly. My heart started beating faster. I had been waiting for this moment for years. I had prepared ideas for expanding the business proposals, for digital marketing strategies, plans for moving into green building techniques. I thought this was finally my time. My father folded his hands on the table and looked at both of us. Then he said the words that would change everything. He said he had decided to bring Derek on as the new CEO of Harrison & Sons Construction. Derek would be taking over operations starting the following month. Time seemed to stop. I sat there, fork still in my hand, staring at my father's face. My mother was smiling at Derek, reaching over to squeeze his hand with obvious pride. Derek himself did not look surprised. He nodded solemnly, like he was accepting a great responsibility he had long expected, which meant he had known. They had discussed this without me. They had made this decision behind my back. I managed to find my voice. It came out steadier than I expected. I asked why. I needed to understand the reasoning. Surely there was some explanation that would make this make sense. My father explained that Derek had an MBA from Stanford. He had experience in modern business practices. The company needed fresh perspective, new strategies to grow. Derek had always been so talented with numbers and strategy, my mother added, her voice warm with affection. I set down my fork carefully. My hands wanted to shake, but I would not let them. I said as calmly as I could that I had been with the company for 10 years. I knew every client, every project, every worker. I had built relationships that kept business flowing even in slow seasons. I had solutions for problems before they became crises. My father nodded. He said that was exactly why I was so valuable as operations manager. Derek would need me to teach him the ropes, to show him how things worked on the ground level. Together we would make a great team. I looked at Derek. He met my eyes and said he was really excited about this opportunity. He said we would make a great team, echoing our father's words. His expression was pleasant, professional, completely devoid of any acknowledgement of what this meant, what this took from me. I could not stay there. I could not sit at that table and pretend this was fine, that I was fine, that 10 years of loyalty and hard work had not just been dismissed in favor of a degree and a nice suit. I stood up, mumbled something about having an early morning, thanked my mother for dinner. I walked out of that house with my spine straight and my face calm, but the moment I got into my truck, my hands started shaking so badly, I had to grip the steering wheel just to make them stop. I drove back to my apartment in Southeast Portland, the modest one-bedroom I had been renting since college because I was saving money to eventually buy a house. I'd been putting everything back into proving myself, into being ready for the day my father would hand me more responsibility. And now that day had come, except the responsibility was going to someone else. The recognition was going to someone else. Everything I had worked for was going to someone else. But sitting there in my dark apartment that night, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I told myself that maybe this was not the end. Maybe Derek would surprise everyone. Maybe he would bring those fresh ideas and modern strategies, and the business would thrive. Maybe I was being selfish, letting my pride cloud my judgment. I decided to give it a chance, to support my brother, to trust my father's decision. After all, they were family. And family meant something, did it not? Derek started as CEO on the 1st of May 2018. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting in the warehouse where we stored equipment and materials. All 45 employees gathered, from veteran foremen to recent hires, everyone curious about what this change would mean. Derek stood at the front, in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt, looking like he had just stepped out of a leadership seminar. He talked about his vision for modernizing the company, about efficiency and cutting costs, about taking Harrison and Sons to the next level. I watched the faces of our workers. Jimmy, our head foreman, who had been with us for 23 years, kept his expression carefully neutral, but I knew him well enough to see the concern in his eyes. These were men who had built their careers on doing quality work, on taking pride in craftsmanship. The phrase cutting costs made them nervous, and rightly so. I tried to help Derek in those first weeks. I really did. I walked him through our project management system, introduced him to key clients, explained the relationships with our suppliers. But Derek had a way of listening that made it clear he was waiting for me to finish talking rather than actually absorbing what I was saying. Whenever I explained how we did something, he would nod and then say that was the old way, that we needed to innovate. The first major decision Derek made was in June. He decided to switch suppliers for our lumber and concrete to save money. The new supplier offered prices 15% lower than our longtime partner. On paper, it looked brilliant. I tried to explain that our current supplier gave us priority scheduling and consistent quality, that the relationship was worth the slightly higher cost. Derek pulled out a spreadsheet he had created, showing how the savings would increase our profit margins. He told me to trust him, that he had done the cost analysis. The new materials arrived for a project we were doing in West Lynn, a custom home for a family who had hired us based on our reputation for quality. Within 2 weeks, we started having problems. The lumber was not properly dried, causing warping issues. The concrete did not cure evenly. We had to redo work, which meant delays, which meant an unhappy client. I spent hours on site fixing problems that should never have existed in the first place. In July, Derek made his next move. He decided we needed to streamline operations by cutting staff. 3 workers were let go, including Jimmy the foreman, who had been my mentor when I first started. Derek called it unfortunate but necessary, a business decision to improve efficiency. He sent out an email thanking them for their service and wishing them well in future endeavors. Just like that, decades of loyalty and experience were gone. I confronted Derek in his office, my office really, since it had been mine before he arrived. I told him firing Jimmy was a mistake. Jimmy knew more about construction than anyone. He kept projects running smoothly. He had relationships with inspectors and subcontractors that made our jobs easier. Derek leaned back in the chair, completely calm, and told me this was a business decision, not a personal one. He said I was too emotionally attached to legacy employees, and that was exactly the kind of thinking that prevented companies from growing. We had our first real argument that day, right there in the office with the door open where other employees could hear. I told him he was destroying what our father had built. He told me I was undermining his authority at every turn. We both said things we probably should not have, and afterward, the atmosphere in the office changed. People started taking sides. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. By August, Derek was taking on more projects than we had capacity to handle. I warned him we did not have enough experienced workers, especially after the layoffs. He said we would hire temporary contractors to fill the gaps. What he did not understand was that construction is not like shuffling spreadsheets. You cannot just plug in random workers and expect quality results. The temporary contractors did not know our standards. They did not understand our systems. They made mistakes that cost us time and money and, worst of all, reputation. In September, we lost our first major client, a commercial renovation worth $200,000 a project that should have been straightforward. The client, Mr. Patterson, had worked with us before on smaller jobs. But this time, we were 3 weeks behind schedule due to the inexperienced crew and the material issues. Mr. Patterson gave us one chance to get back on track. We missed it. He canceled the contract and hired another contractor to finish the job. I heard later that he told people in the industry that Harrison & Sons was not what it used to be. That hurt more than anything. October and November were a nightmare. Client complaints were piling up. Our Yelp rating, which had been 4.8 stars, dropped to 3.6. Workers were stressed and demoralized. I was working 16-hour days trying to salvage projects, stepping in personally to fix problems, smooth over angry clients, keep things from completely falling apart. Meanwhile, Derek kept blaming external factors. It was the economy, he said. It was difficult clients with unreasonable expectations. It was bad luck. Never once did he look in the mirror and acknowledge that his decisions were the problem. I was exhausted. Not just physically, though. 14-hour days in the rain and cold while dealing with crisis after crisis had worn me down to nothing. I was exhausted emotionally. I felt like I was watching something I loved die slowly, and no matter how hard I fought, I could not stop it. Then came Thanksgiving. 7 months since Derek had taken over. 7 months of watching revenue decline, watching workers quit, watching our reputation crumble. I went to my parents' house that Thursday with a folder full of financial reports and client feedback. I had decided it was time to have an honest conversation. The numbers did not lie. Revenue was down 28%. 3 of our most loyal clients had moved to competitors. Team morale was at an all-time low. Something had to change. We sat down to dinner, the same 4 of us around that oak table. My mother had made turkey with all the traditional sides. For a while we ate in awkward silence. Then I pulled out the folder. I set it on the table and told my father we needed to talk about the business. I showed him the reports. I walked through the client losses, the employee turnover, the declining quality ratings. I laid it all out as clearly and calmly as I could. I told my father that Derek's decisions were destroying what he had spent 40 years building. I was not trying to be cruel or vindictive. I was stating facts. The business was in trouble, and it was directly tied to choices Derek had made. Derek's face went red. He said I was just jealous, that I had never wanted him there in the first place, that I had been undermining him from day one, and this was exactly the kind of toxic behavior that was holding the company back. I kept my voice level. I pointed to the numbers again. These were not opinions or feelings. These were measurable results. 28% revenue decline, 3 major clients lost, 8 employees quit. These things spoke for themselves. My mother set down her fork and told me I was being unfair to Derek. She said these things take time, that any transition period has challenges. She said Derek was doing his best and I needed to be more supportive. I looked at my father, waiting for him to see reason, waiting for him to acknowledge what was obvious to anyone with eyes. He was quiet for a long moment, his face troubled. Then he said Derek needed more time to adjust. He said I needed to be more patient, more supportive of my brother. He suggested that maybe if I stopped criticizing every decision, Derek would have an easier time leading. Something inside me cracked. I had been patient. I had been supportive. I had worked myself to exhaustion trying to save projects Derek had jeopardized. And still it was not enough. Still, I was the problem in their eyes. Derek said maybe if I was not undermining him at every turn, things would be better. My mother nodded in agreement. My father told us both to calm down, but then he looked at me and said if I could not work with Derek, maybe I needed to reconsider my position at the company. The room went silent. I looked at each of them one by one. My mother, who had always favored Derek, was looking at me with disappointment. Derek, who had swooped in and taken what I had spent a decade building, looked self-righteous. My father, who I had worked beside for 10 years, who I had given everything to, could not even see what was right in front of him. I stood up from the table. My voice came out calm, almost cold. I told my father he was right. I did need to reconsider my position. I thanked my mother for dinner and walked out of that house knowing I would not be coming back. That night I sat in my apartment and thought about everything. 10 years of 6 a.m. starts and late nights. 10 years of choosing family business over my own dreams. 10 years of hoping that one day my father would look at me the way he looked at Derek. I had been trading my life for validation that was never going to come. I had been pouring myself into something that would never pour back. The next Monday morning, I walked into my father's office and handed him a letter. 2 weeks' notice. Resignation from Harrison & Sons Construction. Effective the 15th of December, 2018. My father looked at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. He told me I could not be serious, that I needed to think about this. I told him I had been thinking about it for 10 years. I told him he had made his choice when he gave Derek the company, and now I was making mine. Those last 2 weeks were strange. I finished up the projects I was directly managing. I transferred all my knowledge to the remaining team members, wrote detailed notes about client preferences and ongoing issues. A few of the workers, like Luis, a senior carpenter who I had worked closely with for years, pulled me aside and asked if they could follow me wherever I went next. I told them I would be in touch. Derek did not speak to me during those 2 weeks. He stayed in his office, door closed, probably relieved I was leaving. My father tried one more time on my last day to convince me to stay. I was in the small office that had been mine, packing up my things. A few books, some photos, my hard hat that had my name stenciled on it. He stood in the doorway and said the company needed me. He said family was supposed to stick together. I looked at him and said he had 10 years to see me, 10 years to value what I contributed. He never did. This was not about the company anymore. This was about my life, my future, my worth as a person. And I was done waiting for him to recognize it. I walked out of Harrison & Sons Construction for the last time on the 14th of December 2018. I carried one cardboard box with my belongings and drove away in my truck. I did not cry. I felt empty, but I also felt something else. Something I had not felt in years. I felt free. January of 2019 was bitter cold. I spent the first week of the new year in my apartment thinking about what came next. I had $75,000 in savings money I had been setting aside to eventually buy a house. Now I was going to use it to buy my future. I registered a new company, Griffin Custom Builds LLC. The name felt right. Strong, clean mine. Not Harrison & Sons. Not anyone's legacy but my own. I rented a small office space in Southeast Portland, nothing fancy, just 800 square feet, with enough room for a desk, a drafting table, and a meeting area. I designed a simple logo, built a basic website myself using templates and tutorials. I could not afford a marketing agency, so I learned to do it myself. My business plan was straightforward. I would focus on quality craftsmanship, personal attention to every client, transparent pricing, and integrity above all else. I would use eco-friendly materials whenever possible because green building was becoming more popular, and I believed in it. I would treat my workers with respect and pay them fairly. I would build the kind of company I had always wished Harrison & Sons could be. Those first weeks were terrifying. I woke up at 5 every morning with my heart pounding, wondering if I had made a massive mistake. I had walked away from steady income, from family, from everything I knew. But then I would get up, make coffee, and get to work. Because what choice did I have? I had burned the bridge behind me. The only way was forward. My first client came through Luis the carpenter, who had worked with me at Harrison and Sons. He had a friend, a young couple named Sarah and Tom Jensen, who needed their kitchen renovated. They had a budget of $40,000 and a lot of anxiety about finding the right contractor. Lewis recommended me. I met with them on a Saturday morning in their small bungalow in Selwood. They were nervous, I could tell. I was nervous too, though I tried not to show it. I listened to what they wanted. Really listened. I took notes. I asked questions about how they used their space, what frustrated them about their current kitchen, what they dreamed about. Then I went back to my office and spent 3 days creating a detailed proposal with hand-drawn sketches and a realistic timeline. When I presented it to them, Sarah actually teared up. She said no contractor had ever taken that much time to understand what they wanted. We started work in February. I was on site every single day working alongside Luis and 2 other guys I hired. I handled problems immediately, kept the Jensens updated, constantly stayed within budget, and finished 2 days early. When it was done, their kitchen was beautiful. More importantly, they were thrilled. Sarah posted photos on social media and wrote a long review about how Griffin Custom Builds had exceeded every expectation. Tom told everyone at his office about us. Word spread. That is how small businesses grow when you do things right. One happy client tells their friends. Those friends call you. If you treat them well, they tell their friends. By March, I had 3 more projects lined up. One of them was from Mr. Patterson, the client who had canceled his contract with Harrison and Sons. He had heard about my new company through industry connections. He called me and said he wanted to give me a chance on a restaurant expansion project worth $120,000. I will be honest, my hands shook when I hung up that call. It was more than just a big project. It was validation that my reputation was separate from the Harrison name, that people trusted me, Leon, not just the family business. I worked like a madman that spring and summer. 18-hour days were normal. I was owner project manager, sometimes laborer when we needed an extra set of hands. I reviewed every estimate, met with every client, personally checked every job site. I made mistakes, of course. I underbid a project and barely broke even. I hired a subcontractor who turned out to be unreliable and had to fire him mid-project. But I learned from every mistake. I adapted. I got better. By December of 2019, my first full year, Griffin Custom Builds had generated $1.2 million in revenue. I had hired 15 employees. I had moved to a larger office space. And I had won the Best New Contractor Award from the Portland Home Builders Association. I stood on that stage accepting the award, looking out at an audience of industry professionals, and I thought about my father sitting in his office disappointed in the son who had walked away. I wondered if he had heard about this. I wondered if it mattered to him. Then I decided it did not matter if it did. I was not doing this for him anymore. 2020 brought challenges nobody expected. When COVID hit in March, construction ground to a halt across the country. Clients canceled projects, supply chains broke down, contractors everywhere were struggling to survive. I was scared. I had just gotten my business off the ground, and now it felt like the world was ending. But I adapted. I started offering virtual consultations. I implemented strict safety protocols on job sites. I realized that people stuck at home suddenly cared a lot more about their living spaces. They wanted home offices, outdoor living areas, renovations that made their houses feel better. We pivoted to focus on those needs. While other contractors were laying people off, I was hiring. By the end of 2020, our revenue had grown to $2.1 million. 2021 was the year everything changed. I hired 2 project managers, which freed me up to focus on business development and bigger projects. We opened a second location in Beaverton to serve the western suburbs. I launched a commercial division because more businesses wanted to work with us. I formed partnerships with architects and interior designers. We became known not just for quality construction, but for collaborative problem solving. Revenue hit $3.8 million. We had surpassed what Harrison and Sons made in their best year. By 2022, Griffin Custom Builds was one of the top-rated contractors in the Portland metro area. We were featured in Portland Monthly magazine in an article about businesses that thrived during challenging times. I did the interview in our new office, which had expanded to 3,000 square feet with a proper showroom. We had 52 employees. Revenue reached $5.3 million. I was financially secure in a way I had never imagined. But more than that, I was respected. Clients sought us out specifically. Other contractors asked for my advice. I had built something real, something valuable, something entirely my own. Through all this, I heard things about Harrison and Sons. The construction industry in Portland is not that big. People talk. I heard they kept losing clients. I heard the quality problems continued. I heard workers kept quitting because morale was terrible. I heard that Derek blamed the economy, blamed difficult clients, blamed everyone except himself. I heard that my father, despite being 67 years old and having high blood pressure, had to come out of semi-retirement to try to manage things because Derek was in over his head. But I did not reach out, and they did not reach out to me. Pride works both ways. Spring of 2023 arrived with cherry blossoms and longer days. I was in a good place. Griffin Custom Builds was thriving. I had bought a house in southwest Portland with a view of the hills. I had a team I trusted, clients I enjoyed working with, and enough financial cushion that I did not lie awake at night worrying about payroll. I had even started dating again, something I had barely had time for during those intense first years of building the business. Life was full and good and mine. On a Saturday morning in April 5 years, almost to the day since that dinner, when my father announced Derek would be CEO, a courier delivered a package to my home. It was a thick envelope, formal and heavy, sent from the Harrison and Sons office address. My stomach tightened when I saw it. I had not heard from anyone in my family in over 4 years. The silence had become its own kind of relationship. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on my father's personal stationery, the expensive kind he saved for important occasions. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered, less controlled. He was 67 now, not old but not young either. The years had passed. The letter started with an apology. He said he was sorry. Sorry for not seeing my value. Sorry for the way things happened. Sorry for choosing Derek when I had been the one who was there day after day, year after year. The words looked painful on the page, like each one cost him something to write. Then he got to the real reason for the letter. Harrison and Sons Construction was failing, not just struggling, failing. They had debts of over $400,000. They were down to 15 employees, and most of those were looking for other jobs. Derek had given up 6 months earlier, moved back to San Francisco, blamed the business for not being viable in the current economy. My father had been trying to hold things together alone, but he could not do it. He was tired. He was sick. His blood pressure was dangerously high. The doctors were worried about his heart. He was asking me to come back, begging me, really. He offered to make me CEO with complete control. He said the company was my legacy too, that it would break his heart to see 3 generations of work disappear. He said he knew it was a lot to ask after everything that had happened, but he was desperate. They were desperate. At the bottom of the letter, in different handwriting, my mother had added a note. It was brief, just a few lines. She said they had been wrong about Derek. She said they needed me. She signed it simply, Mom. I read the letter 3 times sitting there in my sunny kitchen with my coffee getting cold. I waited for the feelings to come. Anger. Vindication. Satisfaction at being proven right. But none of those came. Instead, I just felt peaceful, calm, clear. 5 years ago, this letter would have meant everything. 5 years ago, I would have read it as the validation I had spent my whole life craving. My father finally seeing me, my mother finally acknowledging my worth, the chance to step into the role I had always deserved. 5 years ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But I was not the same person I had been 5 years ago. I had spent those years building something from nothing. I had proven to myself that I did not need their approval to be successful. I had created my own legacy, one that was not tied to family obligation or desperate attempts to earn love. I had built Griffin custom builds with integrity and hard work, and it was thriving. I had a team who respected me, clients who trusted me, a reputation I had earned on my own merit. Going back to Harrison & Sons would mean sacrificing all of that. It would mean taking on $400,000 of debt and a damaged reputation. It would mean fixing Derek's mistakes, cleaning up the mess he had made, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Could I do it? Probably. I had the skills, the experience, the industry connections, but the real question was not could I. The question was should I. I stood up from my kitchen table and walked to my home office. In the filing cabinet, I found what I was looking for. A business loan brochure from a local bank, one of those things you get in the mail and usually throw away. I had kept it for some reason, filed it away. Now I knew why. I took out a manila envelope and slipped the brochure inside. Then I wrote a note, keeping it professional and brief. Dear Dad, I hope this helps. Best of luck with the future of Harrison & Sons. I signed it Leon. I addressed the envelope to my father at the business address. I put it in the mail that afternoon, sending it certified so I would know he received it. Then I went for a long walk in the hills near my house, breathing in the spring air, feeling lighter than I had in years. I was not being cruel. I was not trying to hurt him or get revenge. I was simply setting a boundary that should have existed all along. Their choices had consequences. Derek's incompetence had consequences. Their favoritism and blindness had consequences. Those consequences were not my responsibility to fix. I had spent 10 years of my life trying to earn their approval, trying to prove I was worthy of the family business. I had spent the last 5 years learning that I did not need any of that. I was worthy because I was capable, hardworking, and principled. My worth was not determined by whether they recognized it. In the days after I sent that envelope, I felt something I had not expected. Closure. Real, genuine closure. The knot of resentment I had carried for 5 years started to loosen. I stopped wondering what my father thought when he heard about my success. I stopped hoping my mother would realize her mistake. I stopped wanting anything from them at all. And in that absence of wanting, I found peace. It has been 6 months since I sent that brochure. I do not know what happened to Harrison & Sons Construction. I assume they either found financing or closed down. Maybe my father sold the assets. Maybe Derek came back and tried again. Maybe someone else bought the name and started fresh. I genuinely do not know. And here is the thing. I am okay with that. I do not need to know. It is not my story anymore. Griffin Custom Builds continues to grow. We just won our bid for a major commercial project, a boutique hotel renovation worth $2 million. We are hiring 5 more people next month. I have been talking with a business partner about expanding into sustainable housing development, building entire neighborhoods with green technology and energy-efficient design. The possibilities feel endless. I have learned things over these past 5 years that I never could have learned if I had stayed at Harrison & Sons. I learned that rejection is not always about your value. Sometimes people cannot see what is right in front of them because they are looking for something else. My parents were looking for the prestigious MBA, the Silicon Valley success story, the son who looked good on paper. They missed the son who showed up, who did the work, who loved what they had built. I learned that family and loyalty are not the same thing. You can love your family and still walk away from them. Sometimes walking away is the only way to survive. Sometimes the people who are supposed to support you are the ones holding you back, not because they are evil, but because they are human and flawed and cannot give you what you need. I learned that building something from nothing is terrifying and exhilarating and worth every sleepless night. When you succeed on your own terms without anyone handing you anything, that success means something different. It sits deeper. It belongs to you in a way that inherited success never could. Most importantly, I learned that proving others wrong was never the goal. For a long time, I thought that was what drove me. I thought I was building Griffin custom builds to show my family what they had lost, to make them regret their choice. But somewhere along the way, that stopped mattering. I kept building because I loved the work, because I was good at it, because creating something excellent with a team of people I respected gave my life meaning. The best revenge was not making them feel bad. The best revenge was living well, building well, being happy. I think about that dinner in April of 2018 sometimes. That moment when my father announced Derek would be CEO and my world tilted sideways. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I see it differently. If they had given me the company, I would still be there. I would be managing the same 45 employees, working with the same clients, following the same patterns my father established. I would be competent and reliable and successful in a safe, limited way. Instead, they forced me to leave. They pushed me out into the cold, where I had to figure out how to survive on my own. And in that survival, I discovered I was capable of so much more than I ever imagined. I built something bigger and better than what I left behind. I became someone bigger and better than the person I was when I walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes the people who overlook you do you the biggest favor. They give you the freedom to become who you were always meant to be. They set you loose from the weight of expectations and family legacy and the desperate need for their approval. And once you are free of all that, once you stop trying to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be, you can finally figure out who you actually are. I am Leon. I am the founder and CEO of Griffin Custom Builds. I am someone who treats people with respect, who does excellent work, who builds things that last. I am someone who walked away from family expectations and created my own path. I am enough exactly as I am, whether anyone in my family ever realizes it or not. And honestly, that is all I ever needed to know. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to believe in you? Have you ever had to walk away from something you loved because staying would have destroyed you? Drop your story in the comments. I read everyone, and sometimes it helps to know you are not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I share more stories about resilience, redemption, and finding your way when life does not go according to plan. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is still trying to earn approval they might never get. And remember this, you do not need anyone's permission to be successful. You do not need validation from people who cannot see your worth. You just need courage, consistency, and belief in yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you write yours. Take care of yourself out there, and remember the best chapters of your life might be the ones you write after everyone else gave up on you.